So recently I got a hate comment about how my videos are a flex to show how much money I've spent, but I think the real flex, and tell me if I'm wrong because this is a very Asian thing, is to share how much money I've actually saved. Whenever someone compliments me on an article of clothing or something that I bought that was coincidentally thrifted, I'm always so proud and ready to share, oh, I thrifted it at this random store and how much I got it for. Like, it's such a strange yet niche thing to share, like, I managed to find this great deal. If you're new to my channel, my name is Alice, and as much as I love bags, I'm also trying to help you get your bag this season, like your retirement and your other financial goals. So one of the great things that I like is sharing how you're able to save money on the bags that you do choose to purchase, and also think about whether you want to buy a bag at all. And today I wanted to share my best designer bag deals. One, because I love the things that I've purchased, and two, I love the price at which I purchased them. And sometimes the two and two are very hard to separate. If you relate, please comment below. The first bag I wanted to share was this mini Lady Dior. Now, she is such a stunner. She is this beautiful pink color, and the thing I love about her is that she is like a true bubblegum pink. The one thing I found with many Dior pink colors is that they're neither here nor there. Their powder pink is very elegant and sheer, but sometimes pulls beige, and then their permanent blush pink kind of looks too dull sometimes. So I really like this because one, it's cute but elegant, and two, I scored such a great deal on her. So she was released in July 2023 retail, and retail it's about $5,500 USD. I got this in Singapore, and so in Singapore, a mini Lady Dior retails for 8,000 Singapore dollars. And 6 months later, I walk into this shop in Singapore that's like this small consignment shop, and I see this for 3,000 Singapore dollars. So that's 2,300 US dollars. So I got this bag practically new for over half off. Listen, I was shocked. Now, this did not come with, for example, like a box or a dust bag, but honestly, I got dust bags at home. I throw away the box, and the box and the dust bag are not worth that extra, $3,000 that I saved. One of the things I really want to do when I go back to Singapore is share all the special stores that I really like. But the overall tips I have for scoring a deal like this is, one, is to wait. More and more you see in the secondhand market that people are starting to like buy luxury bags and then sell and then buy a new one because the trends keep on changing or people are regretting their purchases. And so you have to take advantage of that. Don't feel the rush to buy a bag immediately. The essays are lying to you when they say like the color is never going to come back. Please, the color is always going to come back, or there might be a different color, but it's just going to be such a slight variation. I don't think that sense of urgency the essays are telling you should motivate you to buy a bag immediately, because that is why people end up reselling it in the secondhand market and taking such a huge loss. And so even waiting 6 months for a bag might be able to get you the bag that you always wanted. And if you think that 6 months is too long to wait, then maybe that bag wasn't supposed to be a permanent bag in your collection. The second tip I have is that I got this in a smaller consignment store. I think finding ways to find your local consignment store or something that's a little bit smaller will help you get a better deal, because one, they have less overhead, and two, they don't even have the ability to charge more. I definitely see bigger brands like The RealReal or Fashionphile, one, because they're just sitting on so much inventory and probably have a lot of overhead costs. They probably do have to charge a little bit more. And then two, because they're so well known, they have the ability to charge more. So my second tip is to find a smaller consignment store that you trust, or to just pay a small fee for authentication after you go and buy the product. But yeah, isn't she adorable? I really, really love her. I ended up buying this as a gift to myself when I ended up being admitted to Harvard. And the sad thing is, because I'm going to school every day now, I had very little opportunities to wear such a beautiful bag. But now that it's the holidays, I'm very, very excited. The second bag I want to mention isn't a bag that I bought, but is this black classic flap. Now, this is obviously vintage. All the puffing has basically flattened. And I do want to preface this all by saying that this was actually my grandmother's, so I never necessarily bought this bag, but there are a few things I want to share about this bag that I feel will be helpful for people who are looking for a classic flap. The first thing is obviously go vintage. I feel like vintage is way better price and also quality. I mean, if you're okay with this flattened look, you can basically get this Chanel classic flap for about $5,000. And my second tip is to buy a classic flap in a different color. So this classic flap was actually navy blue, and because it was so old, I wanted to refresh the bag a little bit, and so I paid about $400 to paint the whole color black. And they did a pretty good job, but if you look kind of closely, sometimes you can tell that it was painted over. But for the most part, it is pretty immaculate, and it definitely freshens up the bag a lot. And so if you buy a classic flap that's vintage, that's like in a blue color or a bright red, you can actually get those for about $3,000 or even less sometimes. And so I think that is a good way in which you can score a great deal. Buy a bag in a different color and then paint it to the color that you actually want, if the color that you want is like a black or a dark neutral. Or even buy a white bag. You know, white bags decrease in value a lot because once they get dirty, it's just so obvious and it looks so old. And so then you can buy that for much cheaper and then paint it almost any color that you want. And the last tip that really relates to the classic flap is that maybe don't get the double classic flap, maybe get just a regular rectangular, and that decreases the value significantly in terms of how much you actually have to pay. But the function of the bag and sometimes the exterior almost look very alike. And I'll be very honest, and I've said this in other videos, I'm not a huge fan of the double classic flap just because there's no real function for this second flap and it limits the space of the actual compartment itself. Going on to this idea of buying a different model. Now you might think that this is the bag that you want, and if that's really the one that you want, then you should definitely go for it. But if you're someone who's just a little bit more open-minded, I think you can score a great deal because there's so many wonderful bags out there that are also branded that you can get for a great deal just because they're not as popular. So for example, this bag I got is this adorable top handle Versace bag. Now obviously this is not as expensive as other bags. It's only a couple $100s if you were to resell it in the resale market, but it is wonderful. Like, it's a great patent leather, it can fit a whole lot, and it's pretty unique. Like, nobody I know has this bag and I love it just the same. So I think if you're going shopping for vintage items and you're more open-minded, you can score really, really great deals. For example, I went to this store called Vintage Amore. Now I know it's super popular in Japan, especially for tourists, and a lot of the prices there are a little bit higher, but if you get their other bags that are lesser known, not even a lesser known brand, but just a lesser known bag style, you can get, for example, like a Celine bag for like $800. And so I think being bougie on a budget is definitely a real thing. And not only are you going to be saving money, you're going to be looking more unique because everyone has the same bags anyway, and why not just get something that's a little bit more different? Now, if you're someone who's not as interested in buying secondhand, I do have a few tips on how to get a bag retail for cheaper. This brings to my third designer bag that I want to share, which is my Mini Anjou. Now, I know that this has become recently very, very popular and quite difficult to get. It's also more expensive than the larger Goyard totes because of the fact that it has a leather lining inside. So you basically get a two-in-one, but I'll be honest, I've never used the reversible side because the whole point of me getting this bag was so I could throw it around, and the fact that it was canvas, it was very much my casual bag. But if you're going retail, I actually managed to score this in Korea. And I know now in South Korea, it's actually quite difficult to get this. There are certain hoops you have to go through now, but at the time when I got this, you could just walk in and they had every single color. And so my top tip is to always go shopping when you travel because you can get your tax refund, and sometimes the currency exchange rate is in your favor. In a previous video, I talked about Japan and how some of the retail stores actually had way cheaper prices because of the exchange rate. That has actually changed now, which is like really sad. So the prices are basically the same because they've basically adapted the price to match global rates. But if you had just gone earlier this year when I went in April, a lot of the bags were like $400, $600 cheaper because of the exchange rate, and they had not managed to close that loophole yet. So my other tip is not just to do the VAT refund, but to really think about the currency exchange rate, because as much as this is a sad thing that they've managed to increase the price, it does have some lag time, and LVMH as a company, or even other luxury brands, aren't necessarily able to move as quickly as an individual can. So what I recommend is always going onto a website and then changing the location to see the price in that local currency, and so you can mentally prepare to see if it's actually worth your while to go and buy it in the country that you're visiting. There are also other ways to do it. So for example, in Singapore, when you go to the airport, there's no tax levied, and so that's another way in which you can save a bunch of money. If you know that you're going somewhere, just saving that 9% can be a huge amount because these bags are thousands. So those were my top tips in terms of my best designer bag deals. I'd love to hear your top tips and tricks, and I'd love to hear your story too. Like, what's the bag you got? Where'd you get it? How much did you spend? Like, these are the things that I love hearing. Now, I recognize some of the bags were given to me, and I hope that's okay because my goal is to be as transparent as possible. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing, because this month I want to talk about finances related to bags, scoring a great deal, and when you shouldn't buy a bag at all. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!